AIDA talking about 5 tips for creating highly engaging LinkedIn content, and I certainly want to hear about that. I've got nearly 15,000 LinkedIn contacts, and I don't get out of them what I'd like to get out of them. So we're going to go straight over to Joe in just a minute. Before we do, chats, we've got lots and lots of LinkedIn, of WhatsApp chats going on. We had 2 bicycling fanatics on our earlier chat, and I say that in a gentle, loving way. We've got photography, we've got other things. We just have just started 2 new groups, one for badminton and one which we call Giving Back. So if you're involved in any kind of service, do let us know. We'd like you to join that chat, and we're asking people to come to their peer group meetings and talk a little bit about what they're doing so we can get a sense of giving back. So otherwise you should be familiar with these other chats. ESG is extremely popular, but it's not the most popular. Bookworm's running. And if you want to suggest a chat, suggest it to me or to Donna and Nick, and we'll add it. Yep. The other thing is we strongly encourage you to sign up to cross-functional events. Some of these are actual physical and some of them not. The ones you see on this page, including Joe, who's the first one, are virtual, but the 27th of July, am I right, Donna, is going to be physical. So that will be at Honey, if I pronounce that right. Negotiating Culture, 21st, local hires, and then cross-functional physical event, problem-focused solution. Oh, I missed my favorite one, which is How to Sleep Like a Baby on the 13th of July. I'm sure we all need that. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Joe, unless anyone has any questions, because I think we want to get the maximum out of Joe. Joe, I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to hand over to you. Bless you.
Okay, perfect. I'm actually keen to hear what the complaints were about LinkedIn. That sounds like a more interesting conversation to have. But no, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you joining me here today. We'll try to make this as practical as humanly possible. I want it to be interactive as too, so don't want you to have to listen to me for an hour. That wouldn't be very fun. So please, guys, feel free to jump in, share your experiences. We'll also have portions in which I'd love to get your thoughts on different things too. So feel free to chime in. I feel like Andy, I was hearing him earlier, he could probably co-host it with me, given his experience. So thank you for sharing that earlier, Andy. Awesome. So today we're talking about obviously how to create engaging LinkedIn content. So we're talking about things with how to come up with ideas. I'll be sharing different tools and showing some examples. So real quick, about me in terms of who is Joe Escobedo and why is he here? So I have essentially built up a couple of different businesses over the past 5 years. And someone told me yesterday, you must be an amazing salesperson. And I told them I'm the world's worst salesperson. I have been fired multiple times in my career for being a salesperson. So they're wondering, how do you work with, Adobe and Oracle and all these Fortune 500 companies? And I was like, just through LinkedIn. So the bulk of like I said, the contact, the connections, everything that I've kind of done over the past few years, even writing for Forbes, came through a LinkedIn connection. So I'm obviously a big believer in the platform. I think there are some pitfalls of it as well too, which I'd love to hear your thoughts on. I'm also an ex-LinkedIn content consultant. So they actually brought me in to train their top 20 clients across Asia on LinkedIn from a corporate point of view, as well as an individual. But because we have all individuals, I'll try to keep it more personal branding, individual oriented. All right, there's a course that I create. I'll share it at the very end, but we'll go ahead and dive into it. So this is a framework that I often use, whether it's for social selling or personal branding. I call it the 3C framework. So the first is credibility. So really making sure that you have a credible, trustworthy LinkedIn profile. Obviously, if you don't have that, the other 2 C's don't make any sense, because think about it, when you are sending connection requests, you want people to accept it. You want people to be excited whenever they accept your invitation. So we're not going to be talking about that in this one. I think we talked about that in a previous session, but that's where we'd go deep into looking at things like your LinkedIn headline, keywords, and how to optimize it for specific purposes, whether it's business or media purposes. This is where we're spending the bulk of today's conversation. So once you have a credible LinkedIn profile, how do you go about striking up conversations with your online audiences or your connections? And so the bulk of that, as you can imagine, is through your content that you're creating on the platform. And finally, this one is usually very popular among sales folks is now that we've built up that following, how do we actually convert them either into customers, into employees, into partners, whatever channel or what kind of objective we're trying to achieve? How do we do that in the conversion? And I'm happy to answer some questions on that, but I think for the most part, we'll try to stick within the second C, which is conversation. I'm going to take a short break. And Don, if you could share the poll, I'd love to hear more about you guys too, to find out what is your background. And I'll try to skew the conversation that way.
All right, I will give a few seconds more and then, yep, I will end it and share the result. There you go.
Okay. Okay, business development. Okay, all good. So looks like 44% business development, 3% other. Interesting, no marketing folks on the call. It's funny, when I started my business, I figured, oh, we're going to teach marketers how to do this. But for the most part, we train business development folks over the past few years, which I always thought was quite ironic, but it makes sense. Every time I'm with a senior executive, they always tell me I hate talking to salespeople, but I love talking to experts. And so I think that's one thing that we try to do through our content, is to position ourselves as experts, moving away from that sales hat, even though that's what our objectives are. And how do we go about building those relationships? So thank you guys so much for sharing that. I'll try to keep it a little bit more business development oriented too. So once again, I would love to hear, from you guys, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to creating content on LinkedIn? If you could type it in the chat, I'd love to hear about it. Okay, let's see. All right, pouring in. And you said original thoughts, relevant content, what to share, who will this benefit, content topics, sensitive info, nailing down the areas of topic, contemporary ideas, content, creating original content. That's an interesting one. Sunil says, what I want to be versus what I'm currently. Very, very interesting. How to be different and relevant. Thank you, Bhaskar. Standing out. So tell y'all, we'll keep this from the personal point of view. Attract interaction, frequency of content posting. Okay, so it sounds like most of it is actually quite the same challenges that I hear from my corporate clients, which is how do I stand out from the clutter when there's so much going on LinkedIn, particularly during COVID. I don't know if anyone was on during COVID, but it seems like everyone, because they were working from home, was just sharing stuff nonstop. Some of it good, some of it not so good. So I think there has been a large influx in terms of the consumption as well as the posting over the past year. Awesome, guys. Appreciate that. So I'll try to answer that, the how to stand out one, because I think that's one that I've struggled with for a long time, and one that I still kind of, I'm contemplating about. But before that, let me ask you this question. WIIFT, not WTF. What does WIIFT stand for? Because this is probably the most important acronym. And if Don is going to ask me for the keyword, sorry, someone was saying? Yes, for me. Yes, we have a smart, yes. Kamal is yes. So interesting, because when I do this exercise, people get it, but then people say, what's in it for me? So yes, what's in it for them? What's in it for your audience? This is perhaps the most important acronym of the entire session, because I'll explain why in a minute. Because most of the time we are thinking about it from our point of view. What are we trying to get out of it? we want a raise, we want a promotion, we want new customers or new employees or whatever it is that we want. We think about that 99.9% of the time. What we don't think about is what our audience actually wants. And I think by switching this mindset, you'll actually get more sales, more employees, more media opportunities when you flip the script and think about what's in it for them. So anytime you're thinking about posting something, you ask yourself, what's in it for the audience? What are they actually going to get out of it? Are they going to be something that it's educational? Is it entertaining? Is it engaging for them? Think about that. And I'll explain why, because I did a rant about this recently on LinkedIn. Okay, so this boils down to the type of content on LinkedIn, and there's essentially two kinds. There is selfish and selfless. Now, as you can imagine, the majority of the content on LinkedIn is selfish. It's very self-oriented. It's to essentially pat yourself on the back and say, hey, look how great I am. And I'll want to get your thoughts in terms of two different examples in a minute, but the selfish one is very obvious. You can tell it's very self-serving from an instant. The other side, which I don't think enough people do, is selfless content. So this, once again, is something that you are sharing, something you learned at a conference or maybe a session like this. How can you go about adding value? And I know that saying gets it's said quite often, but I'll try to break it down and see how we can do that in a practical way. So I'm going to shut up for a minute. Two different LinkedIn posts, one on the left. Vimal says, love those humble posts. Yeah, absolutely. One on the left and one on the right. Which one would you say is, let's start with selfish content. Left or right? Okay, interesting. Weird. Okay. I always love doing these because I always learn something as well too. So it looks like most of you are saying left. Okay, no, selfless. Okay, sorry. Louise said, okay, selfless is on the right. Yeah, absolutely. And I was doing a rant about this recently that people were applauding. Is these kind of accreditation ones, they've kind of just gone crazy over the past few months. I don't know if it's tech companies giving away more accreditation points or whether people are looking for new jobs, whatever the case, but you see a ton of these. And my whole rant was, is this selfish or selfless content? And rightly you said, a lot of this is selfish content. Look, it's great that you got a certification, but how does that help me? Do you know what I mean? Like, no one really cares except for maybe yourself and your mother. So how can we flip the script? How can we turn that selfish piece of content into a very simple, selfless one? So I gave a simple example and saying, once again, here's your certification, but then what are the three things you learned from it? So let's say I haven't had a chance to take this certification on model building. I don't even know what that is. But let's say that I'm in this kind of space and look, I don't have time to take a certification. You've taken it, you've passed it. What are some things that you've learned from it? It's as simple as that. So I had the headline, here's 3 things I learned from blank certification. So learning 1, learning 2, learning 3. And then the bottom it said, hey, has anyone else gotten a certification? If so, what did you learn from it? So once again, it's a very, very subtle, but a very different way of adding value to the conversation. So this is one that I think many people are doing. And so this is why I highlight it. And I think it's that small tweak, just adding on, what was it that you learned, what was you took away from it that you can share with others? That'll really, really make it far less selfish and far more selfless. Okay. Yes, the one on the right is actually from one of my clients. And I love this because I'm in marketing. And so one of the things that I really struggle with is, how do I create an engaging webinar? And so he went out of his way to provide this very, very practical list. And funny story, I just got off a call with him about half an hour ago. And the reason we actually connected is because I had messaged him because I said this and I was like, hey man, this is a great post. I would love to feature you on my podcast. to hear more about your thoughts on promoting webinars. And he says, I would love to, but I actually have another idea. And I said, okay. And he said, well, I've actually been following your podcast and your LinkedIn content already. And what I'd love for you to do is to do the same thing you're doing on LinkedIn and for your podcast for my company. So we actually are launching a series with a tech company, which will hopefully launch next month. And that came through the conversation that he was generally sharing selfless content. I thought it was extremely helpful. I messaged him directly to compliment him on it and saying, I really appreciate you sharing this. And then we struck up a conversation that way. He had followed me. Funny enough, he hadn't liked any of my posts, but he had been following everything that I published. And it was strong enough that he says, I would love to work with you. So once again, this is head of marketing at a very big Fortune 500 tech company saying, I see the stuff you're doing on LinkedIn. Can you do it for my organization? This happened to me again yesterday, the head of a big telecom company. I'll share a quick anecdote in terms of why LinkedIn is so important. So she messaged me and she says, hey, I would love to do social selling for my team in the US. The problem is that my comms team came to me and they said, hey, I've got this agency in mind, but the problem is they don't know anything about LinkedIn. Like they haven't done it. They're not practicing what they're preach essentially. So she says, you are basically doing it. So let me go ahead and you run the training for our company. And it's a very big company. If I tell you who it is, you know exactly who it is. And it's a global project. But once again, just came through practicing what I preach. And she apparently found value out of it. So yes, I appreciate you guys sharing the selfish versus selfless content. I think we can say very easily. In terms of selfless content, you probably don't have to create something this long, but this is just a quick example. All right. And this is once again, on the other side, when you create content only for you, this is what most people are thinking. So this is the question that most people struggle with. I struggled with it for the longest time, is how do you come up with ideas? There's so much to write about. There's so much, rattling around your head. How do you come up with ideas to actually create content on LinkedIn? So this is a trick that I learned when I was writing at Forbes, is I would constantly take down notes from every conversation that I had, whether it was a prospect or an industry leader or an influencer. And I'd find out what are the common challenges they're having. So even in a conversation like this, what I would do is I would say, obviously I wouldn't mention the people, but I would say, you know what, I was running a training session recently with CXOs. And one of the things they kept asking is, how do I come up with original ideas? How do I stand out? How do I be relevant and different? And so that could be a series of content posts that I put out simply by addressing it. Why are these so relevant? Because I know the audience. I'm not making things up out of my head. I'm hearing you guys. I'm seeing what the challenges you're having, and I'm simply addressing them. Because the most powerful types of posts you can create, particularly if you're just starting out, are FAQ posts, frequently asked questions. So these are questions I could answer. So how do I stand out? How do I create original content? How do I keep it consistent? So say three times a week. These are all great questions that we could essentially answer. So the same thing could happen with your, I'll skew it more towards the biz dev folks here a little bit. So anytime you have a meeting with a prospect, jot down what are some of the challenges they had. In my previous organization, we grew so rapidly because one thing that I would do is I would analyze every single email that we got. So anytime they were messaging us to inquiry about our services, I would go through and I would copy and paste all of those, and then I would put them into a word cloud. And I would see, okay, what are the common keywords they're using? What are the common challenges that keep popping up? Let me prioritize those in our content because those are potential clients we want to address or we want to work with. If we can address their challenges in social media, then they'll obviously see that we can share that with them thereafter, and that'll help facilitate sales. So I think content marketing is a bit of a misnomer because it's not just limited to marketing. That's why I don't like the term content marketing. I've seen actually the best salespeople putting out exceptional content marketing, probably better than the marketers, I'll be honest. So I think the business development folks, they have two extremes. I think there are some that really hard sell and some that are just extremely good at LinkedIn and creating content and are growing their portfolio and they're growing their own kind of commission significantly. So making sure you're talking with your prospects, your customers, your employees, it's an internal thing. I personally also like to do that with polls. So LinkedIn has introduced polls recently. And this is one that I just did because I was testing it out, but it gave me some good insight. So for example, I was trying to figure out which market should I cover. Quick context, part of my podcast, I focus on market-specific insights. So for example, China, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. And I said, hey, is anyone actually interested if I covered China marketing? And this was just a snippet of it. There was more votes in here, but there was an overwhelming positive reaction to people saying yes. And so that's why I created a series of China marketing related content, because essentially the audience asked for it. The caveat here is I don't try to abuse this. I know a lot of people are starting to hate the polls because people abuse them. I use them quite sparingly. I might do multiple topics at one time to see, okay, which of these are you most interested in? Is it customer experience? Is it AI? Is it whatever it ever? And then have people vote for which one they would want to get more out of. And then the great thing about polls is that you can actually click on the votes and you can see who is voting on it. So for example, you may give more priority if you see your customers or your prospects voting for something versus probably something who's not going to fit into that mold. So once again, I try to look at the votes, total votes, as well as the quality of the votes. Who are the people coming from? Are they people that I want to work with? If so, I want to place a higher priority in terms of their responses. So that's one way in which I gather ideas as well too. Another thing, and I think this is highly underrated, is follow different industry influencers, association, and media. And this works incredibly well. I have a fintech client and she was asking me, how do I come up with ideas? And I said, okay, are you signed up for the newsletters that, for example, this is the Institute of Banking and Finance. I did a talk for them last week. And she said, no. And I said, well, that's your issue. Because I told her, look, your sales team is, they are far more, plugged into what's going on in terms of the industry, in terms of the topics, in terms of the conversations. So she quickly got on board and was able to get a lot of good insights and ideas, because these are how they make money. A lot of the influencers, associations to some extent, and definitely the media. Their job is to create content that you're going to like. Now, I'm not saying that you should copy and paste their content, because that wouldn't make sense, but adding your own spin to it. So for example, this is one on cracking the code for future fintech workforce. Let's say you're trying to cover a similar topic, but in Indonesia or Malaysia or Singapore, for example. Providing that little local context can make a huge, huge difference. And to answer one of you guys' questions, how do I make it relevant? This is something that I've kind of tinkered with over the past few years, is going broad versus narrow. And I found that the more narrow, the more niche you go, the better it performs. So to give you an example, a lot of that content is focused on maybe a specific industry or a specific persona being role, or a specific geography. When I do that, it tends to get a much better reception, whether it's on LinkedIn, on my YouTube channel, the podcast, the newsletter. It always outperforms, because once again, people want locally relevant insights. I think that's what people are always challenged with, particularly if you work for the global brand, because you'll get enough American or European centric stuff. You really want to know what's going on the ground in your specific market. So that's one hack for the locally relevant stuff there. All right, I'm gonna pause for a minute because you're probably tired of hearing my mouth. I'd love to hear from you guys. Are you guys currently following on LinkedIn? It could be people, could be organizations. I'd love to hear, why do you follow them? So just let me know in the chat, guys. Who do you follow on LinkedIn? Okay, if you could name the specific people, just so I can get a sense of who it is. Bimal says, I follow people because they share helpful ideas and content. Okay. Organizations, thought leadership, jobs. There we go. Some people are looking for jobs. No harm in that. So they're interested in technology. Business leaders like Richard Branson, Elon Musk, because they're inspirational. Okay, anyone else? Reflection of what I'm interested in. Okay. Was following only known people like Richard Branson, Jeff Weiner. Now they follow the content is thought-provoking. Global leaders, learn from their experiences. Absolutely. Try to follow a diverse group, going beyond my domain, looking for different perspectives and learning. Very, very interesting, Kent. I should do more of that as well. Competitors and startups, looking at trends. Absolutely. Jay Shetty, okay. Rory is a great one. Airlines, your industry, okay. Nadella, people you admire. So it sounds like there's a bit of a trend here. There's two types of people. You're following, obviously, the global leaders, which are the Richard Bransons, the Nadellas, the Jeff Wieners. And you're following, it sounds like, ordinary folks who just happen to share helpful content. The reason this is so important because this is something that, once again, people struggle with, and I did it for the longest time, is talking about too many different things. So it sounds like, based on the people you follow, they cover a specific topic. So in this case, whether it's technology or airlines or whatever in industry trends, they're focusing on one specific area. So when you go to their content, they are, you know what you're going to get. So if Richard Branson started talking about, or Elon Musk, for example, started talking about fashion tips, you might be like, okay, what's the, what's the message here? But if he's talking about innovation and technology and things like that, the future, then it makes sense. So I think it's another quick tip is to focus on a niche audience, a niche kind of 3 different content topics. So I call them pillars. So one of your pillars could be, industry specific. So topics that resonate with you. So whether you're airlines, another could be inspirational, because it sounds like a lot of you guys are interested in inspirational content. And this is something that I was very hesitant on doing for the longest time, because you see a lot of those emotional posts and I'm like, I'm not really a super emotional person, but I've got some really interesting stories, a lot of failures, but I want to do it in a way that's not cheesy. And I did it as a way to beta test it because I'm working on a new book. So I use social media to test different topics and different ideas. And the inspirational ones obviously get lots and lots of engagement because people can relate to it on an emotional and a personal level. So for me, I focus on a specific industry, which is B2B tech. I focus on personal stories, so whether they're inspirational or they're kind of underdog or failure stories. And then I focus on my specialty, which is B2B marketing and sales. So I try not to deviate outside of that. So now that I do that, people know exactly where to come for me, if they want to come to me, they know, okay, Joe covers B2B marketing. He must know about it, from his posts and from the clients he works with. Therefore, I'm more inclined to follow him and I'm more inclined to work with him because I know what he stands for. I know what he does. So once again, try to stick to 3 different pillars and not go beyond that. It's very easy to talk about everything under the sun, but then once again, your audience will be very, very confused. All right. So just quick recap, guys. We talked about some of the ways in which you can get ideas. Obviously talking with your prospects, your customers, your partners, polling your audience, and then following different industry associations, influencers, and media. All right. So those are the kind of manual ways to do it. And I think they're the most effective. But let's say you want to broaden your reach. You've done all this already. Let's say you're looking for some tools. So one of the fastest and most effective one is people also ask in Google. So this is great because what Google is essentially doing is pulling the most commonly asked questions around a particular keyword. So going back to the type of content I mentioned, which is the most effective usually is FAQs, Google will essentially tell you within 2 seconds based on any specific topic. So whether it's AI or technology or airlines, for example, Google will often tell you what are people searching for. Your job is then to say, okay, of these questions, which one can I answer in a LinkedIn post, for example. So that's one of the fastest ways. Let's say, Joe, that's great. I'm trying to expand beyond that, and I want to get some questions from a local relevance. So this is a cool tool I found recently called Answer Socrates. And it's the same kind of concept. You just type in a keyword, and then you type in the country, and you can type in the language if you're looking for non-English. And it'll give you the most commonly asked questions around that particular keyword in that particular market. It'll give you everything from who, what, where, when, why, how, as well as a bunch of different other ideas. And so once again, your job is to say, okay, I can answer this one, this one, this one, and this one. So basically that our 4 questions could be 4 specific LinkedIn posts you do. Once again, why is this work so well? Because you are essentially answering questions that people are having. If you can do that well enough, you will be the de facto subject matter expert in that industry or that field. Another one, and this is more in terms of looking at different trends. So some industries are cyclical, whether it is airlines, which I'm guessing the holiday season, you get to see a peak, retail or e-commerce. It's interesting to see what keywords are trending over a particular time. And you can expand this. You can look over a 5-year period. You can look over the past year, and it'll give you insights. Is this keyword actually on the rise? Are people actually searching for it? Or is this kind of a dying keyword? So if you look at keywords like digital transformation, it may be on the kind of decline versus a keyword like customer experience, which now everyone's talking about, is steadily on the incline. So you can see where they are. So this will show you the relative search volume. So this doesn't mean that 100 people are searching for this keyword, but they're showing you the relative search volume out of 100. So once again, this is really good if you have topics that are more cyclical or more seasonal, and you're trying to figure out when is the best time to cover this particular keyword. And once again, great thing, you can sort by market. So let's say I only want to do something by in Singapore, or find out what people in Indonesia, Malaysia are searching for. I can quickly go in there and find out very quickly. If you want, I can go ahead and demo one of these real quick. Do let me know. Otherwise, we will jump on to the next section.
We'd love you to demo one of them, Joe. Which is the one that you use the most?
So one that I always get asked, give me 2 seconds, is Answer Socrates. So let me go ahead and load that up real quick. All right, so someone, let's see, hopefully this works. All right, someone give me can you see my screen? Okay, someone give me a keyword, any keyword. Could be in the chat, could be out loud. Apps, okay. Let's see what comes up for apps. I typed in Singapore because we're based in Singapore. Okay. What? It's a bit wonky today. Let's see. Let's go with vaccination. All right. Okay. This is my internet. Okay, perfect. So this one is related to vaccination because this is something that's relevant to all of us. So once again, if I was the government, and they're basically looking at this as well too, to come up with different messaging for us to take the vaccine. But simple things like, can vaccination be done if you have a cough? Are vaccination centers open on public holidays? Should I get vaccinated in general? Can I delay vaccinations? Where are the vaccination centers in Singapore, ironically, in different parts of the world? Yeah, so once again, it'll give you a bunch of different topics. So if you are in the medical space or the government and you're trying to encourage people to get vaccines, excuse me, these would be some of the questions. And then it'll also give you keywords. So let's say you're trying to expand it and you're trying to get different keywords. So yes, this, I believe it pulls multiple search engines. I believe it's from Google, Bing, and a couple others. So yeah, they consolidate different search engines and they have them in one place. So once again, it's the same concept as people also ask, in that it pulls the most commonly asked questions around a particular keyword in a particular market. Yeah, so it gives you a ton here. I won't go through all of these, but you can get different keyword ideas. So let's say you're doing more kind of search related stuff. You can do comparisons. So a lot of people do like the verses. So let's see if there's a versus one. Yeah. So simple things like this: vaccination versus injection versus immunization. Like, what's the difference? So once again, if I worked for like International SOS, which is like the medical company, these are some of the questions that I might want to address in either my website or my LinkedIn content. Yeah, so once again, you can go down a rabbit hole. There's a tons of questions. I'd recommend, once again, narrowing these down in terms of ones that you think are relevant to your specific audience and that you can address. So that's one tool that I find quite interesting. Yes, and to enter the public. Yes, so enter the public is one that I use. I think it's paid now, which is why last time I checked. Yeah, but Answer to the Public is the one that I used to go to, and I think it's quite good as well too. But I wasn't sure if they've, yeah, so they'll do things like cool like graphics like this. But yeah, I think last time you can only do a certain amount of free searches. With Answer Socrates, I think it was free for now. So everything that I'm mentioning is free as of today. It may change tomorrow. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Joe.
My pleasure. Can you still see my screen? Can you still see? Okay, perfect. All right, so that's what coming up with ideas. The second thing is creating valuable content. And I could do an entire masterclass on this. I've created the course, which goes into very deep detail. But a couple different things. You want to make sure that the sweet spot is right here. So obviously it's relevant to your customers. It's something they're going to find interesting, shareable, or followable, and something that's going to lead to sales as well too. I think what most people try to do is they just focus on this sphere, which is why you see so much self-promotional content out there. I'll quickly talk about this. So this is a copywriting framework that I didn't develop. It's been around for ages, called AIDA: attention, interest, desire, action. So I'll focus on the first one, which is attention, which I think most people struggle, because if you think about it from your first line, this is really what's going to stand out. And it's like a headline in a newspaper. If it doesn't capture your attention, there's no reason for the audience to keep reading. So once again, think about this as your movie teaser, your movie trailer. You want it to be attractive enough that people actually want to read more. So how can you do that? There's a couple quick hacks that I'll share. One of which is calling out the audience. And I didn't do a very good job of this. I probably could have gotten a bit more specific. What I mean by calling out the audience is saying, for example, what's one thing that keeps Singapore business leaders up at night? So I'm calling out the specific audience, Singapore business leaders. I could go even more specific. I could say Singapore CFOs or Singapore CMOs, for example. And this is something I learned at LinkedIn, looking through all the analytics and seeing that the more you make the post specific in terms of the audience, the more you call them out, the more likely you're going to get their attention. So for example, let's say that we were in a crowded space and I started yelling, business associations. This is for Donna. Or I started going deeper and deeper. And then eventually I said something like EGN. So the more specific you get, obviously the more attention you get. But it goes back to how narrow you want to get it. So this one I went a little bit too broad. I could have gone a bit more narrow and talked about Singapore business leaders or Singapore CFOs and put it here or put it at the very beginning. So Singapore CFOs, what's one thing that keeps you up at night? If I was to ask a question. In this case, I interviewed someone and I was taking them through the process. So To answer that question, I've generated some interest by delving a bit deeper. I talk about some of the key points from it. And then the action is where I think a lot of people struggle. If you're in marketing, you've heard of something called a call to action. And most people put call to actions as like, contact me to find out more about what I do, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the right call to action I'm talking about. So the best call to actions are really a question. So in this case, I think I said, what do you think keeps up business leaders up at night? Once again, think about it from a networking point of view. Let's say that you were when we used to do these in persons back in the EGN networking events, if someone asks you a question, you're more inclined to answer it versus them talking amongst themselves. So by answering a simple question that goes back to the piece that you've created, you can have people join the conversation, and that'll help with your engagement as well too. All right, so once again, I want this to be as relevant to you as possible. So if you want to go ahead and share a recent post you've done, I can provide feedback on the spot. So it'll be like a real-time audit. If you're not sure how to do that, I'll show you right now. And I should caveat is there is no wrong or right responses. I just will share some feedback based on my experience. All right, so to do that, what you want to do is you want to go to, let's say, any of my posts. Whoops. Sorry. All right, so let's say, I don't know, it doesn't matter. All right, so you want to click these three dots right here, and you just want to go to copy post. And then I just want to type that into the chat. If you can do that, I will quickly provide some feedback, and we can get the other folks to provide their feedback as well too. Sorry, that was a direct message. I should open it to everyone. So as simple as that. So if you guys want to share one of your recent posts, I'm happy to take a look at it, provide some feedback. All right. I know you're an expert, so this is gonna be a hard one. Oh, nice. All right, so hopefully you guys can still see. So he's almost created like a mini headlines of sorts. So creating the personal touch, delivering superior in-flight opportunities. Is this even possible in a post-pandemic scenario? If so, how? So once again, I love this because it's another one of the best practices I was gonna mention is asking thought-provoking questions. And I think this is a great one. How do you do this, particularly in the airline industry, post-pandemic? So once again, this is a great example. In this one, it looks like you are promoting. Okay, so this is our one where you're promoting a talk you're doing. So another thing you did, which I love, is highlighting or tagging some of the people that are going to be in this. This is a big mistake that I think a lot of people forget is if you're doing this, you want to capture their attention. So if you have the CEO of this company and the CIO of this company, and you get them to like it, for example, then more than likely that'll increase your reach exponentially. I like the little icons. It's a nice touch. The little airplane. This is great because something that's really important is scannability. So this is really easy to scan. It's like short, punchy sentences. There's little emojis there. You've highlighted some of the companies. So once again, if I'm just scanning through this, it's very easy for me to look at this. It's written in a very conversational tone. This one I might break up a little bit because it's a bit chunky, but overall, I think it's very easy to read. And once again, same thing. Any questions or topic you'd like me to bring up, let me know in the comments. So he's striking up the conversation. The only recommendation I will add, and this could be a pet peeve against LinkedIn, is adding links. So think about it. How do LinkedIn and the other social media platforms make money? How do they make money off of us? This will answer why. Yes, sorry. How do the social media companies make money? Yes, they run ads.
By keeping you on the platform.
Yeah, yes, that's basically, yes. They keep you on the platform so that you can see the more ads you can see. And so this is the challenge with having external links. So this jumps to another an outside page, I'm guessing, or is this a LinkedIn? Okay, yeah. So it jumps to an external one. So in LinkedIn's mind, the algorithm is that by posting something like this, you're actually getting people to leave the platform. It's quite frustrating, I know. So what some people have done, and this is something definitely worth A/B testing, is putting this in the comments. So putting the links. Okay, basically he's done it. Okay. So you've done it in the comments as well too. So I would probably just put, to sign up, I'll put the link in the comments. So you've already done it here. But that's something, once again, that kind of impacts your reach, is putting links out to other external things. Another thing that could kill your reach is posting, for example, YouTube videos. So there's two types of videos, there's two types of content really. There is native, which is essentially publishing it directly to the platform, versus external link. So like a YouTube or a Vimeo would be one of an external link. So you're going to get far better engagement in the algorithm if you actually upload a native video, which is essentially downloading the raw file and uploading it in here. Santaj asks a good question. He says, what if you're referring to some article or post or other platforms like HBM or HBR or Medium? So the same principle applies. It depends on how. I would still go ahead and put the link in the comments, but I would go ahead and put your insights in here. So let's say that I saw an interesting piece in HBR. What I would do is maybe I would pull out a interesting quote from it. So let's say it's some stat or some strategy that you learned. I would maybe put that as like the header in quotes, and then talk about your key learnings from that. What does that mean for your industry, for your audience? So that could be one way, because once again, people don't really want to jump to other things. They want to stay on the platform. They want to learn there and go on to something else. Because going back to what you guys were saying, a lot of you guys are going in for thought leadership. So if you can answer it, if you can provide the key essence of that in the post itself, then you might as well do it. You could, if you're doing that though, you can also tag HBR, tag the author as well too, as a way to expand your network and get them to notice you. This is something that worked very well when I was at Forbes, is that anytime someone shared one of my articles and tagged me in it, I was always very happy to see that. So that's something I would probably do instead, rather than saying, hey, I just read this piece, putting a link to it, because it probably won't get the engagement that you really want. Hope that helps answer the question. All right, I think that was a great example of what to do. So like I said, no really downsides there. I know there are a couple other people that want to do it as well too. I'm just cognizant of time. I want to get to some of the other stuff. If we have time, we can loop back to it at the end. All right. So another thing you could do in addition to frameworks like AIDA is use different tools. And I use this. I've created content faster than most Fortune 500 companies. I do it on a daily basis by leveraging the tools that I'm mentioning here. So this one, I'm sure many of you have probably heard of already. It's called Canva. So Canva is essentially a tool in which you can create different thumbnails, different images. They're all templates. Most of them are free. And once again, it's a great way if you want to create your own kind of graphics, whether it's PDFs or static images or GIFs. You can do that pretty fast within Canva. Lumen 5 is another interesting one. So Lumen 5 is, if you've ever seen those videos where it's kind of like a slide share and it has like moving graphics and things like that, it's probably done with Lumen 5. So what Lumen 5 is, if you have a company blog post or an article that you've written, copy and paste that into Lumen 5. And what it'll do is it'll create the video for you based on AI. So the AI tries to figure out what are the keywords I should be including, even the positioning in terms of the text, the imagery, it'll pick all of that for you. So it's getting smarter and smarter in terms of picking the best performing keywords and content from a longer form article. So once again, this is something you would create in 5 to 10 minutes max. Let's say some of you guys like recording via your phone. Let's say you are, that's how you like to convey your messages. There are different tools that you can create auto captions. So there's one called Clips, which I believe is still free, that you can do auto subtitles or captions directly from your mobile device. So basically like this, as you're talking, it'll start putting in the keywords. Some of them have gotten smart enough where that you can put your country. So for example, if you have an Australian accent or a British accent or American accent, they even have Indian accents, for example, you can use tools like this. Quick question, how many people do you think what percentage of people watch videos on LinkedIn with the sound off? Any guesses? Santosh said all of us, 80%. You guys are pretty close. Yeah.
Okay, 60%.
60%. Okay. I think one person got it right. It is around 80%. So 80% of people are not watching with the sound on, which is incredible. So that's why having captions on your videos is so important. And once again, if you're doing it from your mobile phone on the go, then you can easily use a free tool like Clips to automatically create it. And then you can go ahead and edit. So let's say it used the wrong word. It generally butchers my last name, Escobedo. So I have to go ahead and manually type out my name, but for the most part, it gets everything right. Let's say you're doing this from your desktop. There are different tools, once again, to edit and add subtitles. This one's called Kapwing. So this one is more if you're doing it from your mobile device. This one is more if you're doing it from your desktop. Here's another one if you're doing it from your desktop. If you've ever seen these videos where it is like the talking head and someone's going through maybe a how-to video or a demo, they're probably using Loom. So it's a tool in which you can record. Most people use it to do how-to videos. So it'll feature your face if you want to, it'll feature your screen, and then you can go ahead and annotate whatever you're talking about. So let's say you're sharing tips on how to look at financial models or financial statements. You could essentially be going through a real life statement with your face at the bottom, and then you could be giving tips, for example. So once again, these are all free as of right now. That may change, but for the most part, they're free. The caveat for this one is it maximizes or it times out at 5 minutes. But for social, you probably shouldn't have more than 1 to 2 minute videos anyways. Readable is one that is really cool. I use it for our client stuff. It essentially gives you a score based on how readable your content is. So for example, different grade levels. And this helps you to identify, for example, long sentences, jargon, complex words. It'll give you suggestions on how to simplify it. Because once again, it's not about the biggest words or making it complex. It's about simplifying as much as possible. And sometimes it's difficult to do that. Omar, it's a little bit like Grammarly, but Grammarly does it more in terms of like common grammar. So for example, a comma here or a certain word usage here. This one is more in terms of how to make it easier to read, easier to scan, for example. So in this case, it highlights longer sentences. It highlights adverbs that you could remove. It highlights different complex words that could be simplified, and it'll give you recommendations. So it can be used in conjunction with Grammarly, but it's a different tool in your tool belt. Awesome. Santosh says for subtitles on videos, you can use Subly as well too. Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton, and I'll check this one out after this session. All right, now we're gonna go through some real life examples. I'd love to hear your thoughts now that you guys are content experts. here are some real life posts. How might you tweak these posts? I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on it.
Joe, before I comment on that, is it okay to share somebody else's post, or is it better to comment? Because on some other talk about LinkedIn, I can't recall now where and when, there was a discussion about don't share somebody else's post, instead comment on it if you want to really make a difference because of whatever LinkedIn algorithms work behind it. Is that true?
Yes, I would concur with that. I don't know the reason why they discourage it in terms of the algorithm, but yes, anytime you share it, for some reason is detrimental to the reach in the algorithm. So yes, you can either take a screenshot if you wanted to, you could, and still cite the author and the original source. You could comment, but yeah, the last resort is sharing, because sharing really kills reach. I have no idea why that's the case. They should actually just remove the button, because it's actually doing more bad than it is good for, I think, the community. So yes, I think you brought up one key thing that I was going to mention is I wouldn't share this, but I would probably, I would either comment. In this case, it's a bit of a long comment. If you want to go in depth, I'd probably take a screenshot and then I'd go ahead and tag the person. But if it's a shorter one, maybe a paragraph, then I would just add in the comment itself. You can still, because when he's doing it now, is the person may or may not know. They may not get a notification that you shared it.
That's true.
Although LinkedIn recommends you convert your comment to a post. Yeah, I mean, so I think once again, I just, in my experience, it's always kind of killed the reach. Omar says it needs a catchy opening. Yeah, it's a bit chunky. It's a bit, I mean, I don't know if there's any finance folks. Oh, Omar, you are a finance folk. What am I talking about? So you'd be the private audience for this. So they've done some things well. They've highlighted some big company names. So for example, we may want to know what Blackstone is doing, or Soho China, which is a very big company. But to your point, there's nothing here that really grabs my attention and says, okay, what are Soho and Blackstone doing that's really fascinating? I can't really tell. I mean, I can tell from this big image, but let's say, once again, we're not sharing it as it is. We want to talk about the announcement that Blackstone is buying Soho China. How can we add that? And a buddy of mine actually created a really good one. I think Amazon bought a company, and he did this little video on it. Is Amazon's investment in, I think it was MGM, worth it? And he had like a little bit of a controversy around kind of, was it over investing, or did it make sense based on the company's valuation? So I thought that was a smart way to analyze and comment. This one just seems like it's just simply copying and pasting. It's maybe not adding as much value to the conversation. Anything else you would change to it? Anything you like about it? All right, let's go to a couple more. So this is what I was talking about. Let me open this real quick. My internet's like me, it's lagging. So once again, this is very, very easy to scan. It's got like dashes. It's got a nice hook. It says, many years ago, I was sucked into a hustle and grind, working 60 hours a week. I think many of us can relate to that. I was exhausted and unfulfilled. And then it talks about how this person started their own business. This is what I was talking about in terms of native documents. In this case, it's a PDF. So this person essentially, this is essentially a person uploaded a PDF. It should be loading. I think it's just my internet's getting like me. It's a little bit slow at the moment. But this format has worked really, really well, because if you think about standing out in the LinkedIn feed, the great thing about PDFs and about vertical images is it takes up so much real estate. So if you look at one post, and if you're looking at it through this feed, it takes up so much real estate. So it's basically, I have this on the big screen. It's basically the entire post, versus if you're just doing the usual standard one, you won't take up this much real estate. So this has been something I wish it was showing. I'll go ahead and include the link in the chat itself. So if you can look at it on your end. but it's very easy to do. If you've already done like a presentation and you want to share that, you can go ahead and create it. My computer is lagging out. But once again, okay, so this is what the image looks like. It's essentially a slide share. You can click the button here and see multiple pages. So once again, it's taking up so much real estate in the feed, which is what you want. It's once again an eye-catching visual, very simple, clean. I refuse to sacrifice my relationships and health to scale to 7 figures. So for me, it's a very clean interface. I'd love to hear from you guys as well too. Thanks, guys. I know some of you are to run for the call. I will probably wrap up soon too. But if there's any feedback on any of these, do let me know. Otherwise, we can jump straight to the Q&A portion. If there's any questions you guys have. I know it's getting towards the end of the day, guys. So I appreciate you hanging with me this long.
Joe, that's great. Don has added the questionnaire link in the chat. If you can't, for some reason, click on the QR code.
Okay.
So are you about to leave us, Joe? Or are you open to a couple of questions? Or
Yeah, I can open up a couple questions.
Okay.
Wow,
Let me
yeah.
Sorry. Some good feedback already. Let me throw open the floor. There are 25 of you. Do we have any questions for Joe? Are you going to share this material with us, Joe, or is it all super secret?
I can share some of it. I will probably abridge some of it. That's okay.
Well, yes. I mean, speaking for myself, I'm interested in a couple of the tools that you mentioned, like the search tools and all that sort of things.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
And we can share them with members, increase their reach.
Yeah.
One of the things, I should shut up. I tend to talk too much. Do other people have questions for Joe?
I think it's towards the end of the day.
One of the things I was sharing earlier, Joe, in my breakout group was how to actually expand the number of people that you're connected to, because that's pretty important if you're intending to include your reach. I went from just a couple of thousand to about 15,000 using an app called Duck's Soup, and I'm sure there are lots of other perfectly good apps, which, for those who don't know, is a very simple way of automating invitations that you can use with Net Navigator. It's very effective. It works very well with LinkedIn. I only mention that because otherwise you're personally inviting people, and that's very tedious. I don't know if you have any views on that, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of different things is I would say caveat with a lot of those tools is LinkedIn is cracking down on some of them. Not to say they're illegal, but I know some folks who have had their accounts banned. I think you have to set like a minimum. You want to a threshold in terms of how many invites you let the bot send on your behalf. But you have to make it more and more conservative because LinkedIn is starting to crack down on tools like that. They don't really like those third-party tools. One thing that I've done, and it's been very simple. I don't remember actually how I did it, but if you go to my profile, actually, you guys probably won't see it now, but previously there was a connect button. And I think people feel a bit hesitant to connect, but now if you go to my profile, you should see a follow button or something like that. And I think this has been something that has helped because even if you're following me, you still see my content. And to your point, I have about, this is started at the beginning of the month. I think I had about 10,000. I have about 350 followers as of new ones of this month. And this is all organic. So I think another caveat is quality versus quantity. Yes, Kent mentioned, yeah, creator mode. Absolutely. You can switch to creator mode and it will by default go to follow. So quality versus quantity. And for me, I'm a bit, I wouldn't say I'm a LinkedIn snob, but I'm a bit more reserved in terms of who I connect with. I always say I'm happy to connect with each of you guys because you were kind enough to listen to me for an hour. So thank you for that. But I think switching to creator mode can help to some extent because people feel less apprehension if they're following you versus connecting with you directly. So that could be something to boost your followers.
One tip that I shared with some of my friends, which has worked, is if you want to get more followers, comment on a lot of posts, because you get to see, you get to have other people see your comments, and then they take an interest, and then they come visit your profile, and then they'll follow you, or they'll reach out and connect with you.
Absolutely. I think it's a great way to build relationships as well too. So if you go back to, I have it right here, there we go. How to win friends and influence people. People are interested in you when you're interested in them. So I think that's a great point. If you're commenting on other people's posts, caveat, and once again, there's a caveat for everything here, is salespeople are really, really bad at saying, you know, if you look at a salesperson LinkedIn activity, it's always like, good job, great job, congratulations, good job. Like, it's a little bit obvious to what you're trying to do. I think there was a subtle way to do that, going back to Bob's point. If you are adding like a genuine compliment, or you're adding an observation. So I think to his point, I'll share a quick anecdote in terms of how it's worked out for me recently. So there was a marketing director who created this really, really cool video on his LinkedIn. And I messaged him, I commented, I said, this is the best piece of LinkedIn video I've seen from a company. And he obviously was checking my profile, connected. We caught up afterwards, and he said, you know what, I really appreciate you reaching out, because most people don't do that. Most people, they watched the video, there was like 30,000 views, maybe 100 people commented on it. And he said, you were one of the people that took the initiative to comment about it. We're having this conversation. He's gonna be on my podcast. He actually shared that message with his boss, which is, I don't know, the VP of the company. And she was very excited. And I was like, I just literally took 2 minutes to write a comment. It was a genuine compliment. I thought it was an amazing piece that they did. And it led to so many different things. So I think, yes, that is a wonderful tip. I really appreciate you sharing that, Vimal. We'll have the tag team at next time. Hi.
Thank you so much. It's really interesting session. Can you please also show the QR code for the feedback form, please?
Yes.
And everyone, please do help to scan the QR code and take maybe 30 seconds of your time and give a comment. Not on LinkedIn, but on that feedback form, please. So then we can always serve you better, and then having always improve in our events. Thank you. At the same time, yes, I see Andy also raised the hand. Hi, Andy. Go ahead.
I want to make 2 points. So one, adding, Joe, what you were saying in terms of being interested in other people's posts. I mean, sometimes, yes, comments can work well, but it's also, if you don't really know the person, you don't necessarily know what kind of comments they may or may not appreciate. So sometimes the comments might land, sometimes they might not land. But I think what always works is that when you like other people's posts and you like them consistently, then people start looking at, hey, this guy is always following me, this guy is always liking my post, who is this guy? And then when you approach them, let's say a month or 2 later, they're much more open to it because they have seen that you are interested in the work that they do. The other point what I want to bring up is what I've noticed is also quite effective, that when you're doing a career pivot, so you're moving from one area, let's say you've been a programmer and you want to go into sales, for instance, maybe half a year or even earlier than that, if you have the runway, to start posting stuff which is now related to sales. So people start seeing you in a different light, that they don't see you as a programmer anymore, they start seeing you as a salesperson. And by the time you start the job, you already kind of like build the credibility as yourself as a salesperson. And I think that makes sense from a career perspective when you want to have the credibility day one when you start the job.
Absolutely. Great tips. I think, Andy, between you, me, and Vimal will have to tag team it next time. Those are really, really good insights. One thing I'll add on to that is in terms of whether or not they'll be receptive. This is a quick tip for, I think, salespeople. You probably already know about this already, but the concept of mirroring. So by mirroring, what I do is I look at their post, if they're commenting, if someone's posting, and I see, okay, what's the type of language they use? Are they using exclamation points? Are they using emojis? Are they a bit more conservative in the way they communicate? That'll give you a sense in terms of how they like to be communicated to as well, because that's how they communicate. So that's a quick tip that I learned on the outreach side that we didn't get a chance to get to today, but I think it's still quite helpful for those biz dev folks.
Super.
Awesome. Any others? Otherwise, I think it's getting in the evening. I'm sure a lot of us have things to do. I'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Can I ask you a quick question? Toyo speaking. AIDA, right? AIDA. I didn't catch what's the meaning of the desire in this context. Yeah, attention, I understand. Yeah, interest, understands, and action is understands. But the desire, if you give us some other example of desire in this context.
Yeah, desire. It sounds a bit odd. So desire is essentially leading up to the call to action, or leading up to what you're doing. So, for example, the example of you're promoting a webinar. So you talked about, what is the headline and what's going to capture their attention. You go deeper in terms of what who the speakers are, so that might interest them. And then maybe the desire portion is talking about what are the key takeaways, what are some of the things you can learn. So it's essentially, you have your headline, you highlight some of the key speakers or companies, and then you have a little bit in terms of the key takeaways that they can get out of the upcoming section. And then you have your action, which is, hey, basically what Vimal had done is, let me know what questions you have, and we're happy to include it in the topic itself. So it's a little bit structured like that. I'm not doing justice to it. There's tons of literature on AIDA, and like I said, I could spend an entire section on it, but I hope that helps provide more context to it. Sorry,
maybe to add to that, Toyo, if you want to know what is AIDA, you should go and check out the movie called Glengarry Glen Ross. There's a 7-minute clip of that in YouTube, and Alec Baldwin is giving a sales pitch using AIDA.
There we go. That's a beautiful example. I'll have to include that in the next slide for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, what's the name of it again?
It's a YouTube link, okay, but there's some not safe for work language, so don't watch it in the office.
It's definitely not safe for work.
All right, Anderson. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Anything else?
Yep. Anyone else? Otherwise, thank you so much, Joe. Really happy to have you with us. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining. I hope you have a great evening and see you again at the next EGN event. Please don't forget to join in person on your peer group meeting and also on the 27th July. Okay, see you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks, Joe.
Guys.
All right. Thanks,
Okay,
sir.
good session.
So, yep. By the way, so tomorrow we have Sebastian who will join virtually, and we do have what's his name again? Sindhu Menon will join in person. Lady.
Yeah, she's one of our coaches. She's one of our coaches.
Okay, perfect. So that is the 2 person, I think, the new members. So far, I still have the same 8 or 9 virtual and 6 or 7 joining in person. That's it, sadly. But
Well, there's
perhaps
a lot. I mean, I don't know why. Okay, I've written to everyone pretty well, and
me too.
a couple more have said they're coming. So
okay,
let's just see.
I will send you the list that I have. Perhaps you can let me know if anyone else replied to you instead of to me then.
All right, good. Okay, I'll be up early.
I'll see you tomorrow. Then, by the way, who will be there will be Paula. So don't be surprised. Not Jacqueline, but will be Paula, one of the ladies that you met.
Sent me all the materials, the QR code, the upcoming meetings, the. Okay.
By email already. Sakina sent by email.
I saw you sent me the 2 new resumes, so that's good. All right, I'm going to go. Bless you.
Bless you. Bye bye.